month, 2014. We consequently hired him as an advisor for his spend time with his sister. So I haven't had the privilege to spend many years with Professor Bill. However, we have our speakers who have had this privilege of knowing Bill for many, many years, and they will share with us his contributions to USP. They might also share some fond memories of their dealings. So we are honored to have our first speaker, President of USP, Professor Rajesh Chandra, who has known Bill for decades. Thank you for your speech.
Very much. Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, senior members of the Fijian government, heads and representatives of regional organizations and NGOs, Professor Bill Aalbersberg's family from Singatoka, the Dean of Science, Technology and Environment, the Director of I.T.S, staff and students of USP, friends of Bill, distinguished guests, and I want to acknowledge the former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Esther Williams, ladies and gentlemen. Very good evening. And that I echo completely the words that the director has used. Bill was a scholar, as I will speak more about it. He was a leader. He was a mentor. Some of his most ardent supporters and people who want to remember him very fondly are his students. He always was very much involved in making sure that his students and his staff progressed. He was an inspiration to people. He believed very strongly in being engaged for people in university, Fiji, to the region, to science, and to environmental movements, because he was one of the early pioneers of sustainable development. And I knew him, of course, from the day he joined, because when he joined USP in 1984, I had already been here because I joined in 1970, progressed professor of in 1990, and I would have chaired the promotions committee. So I did know him very well. And of course, I continued to know him in another role when in 1999, because I was the chair of the Institute's coordinating committee. So we had a lot of interaction with him. And I must say that because he came, because people who serve want to really go out of their comfort zone, you know, mix with different cultures. And so I think Bill had that very much, and a lot of work by that early service. He was, as Johan has said, a researcher. He covered a whole range of areas, and of course we could not have the luck, so in a range of areas, work in chemical and biological activity, medicinal plants, marine organisms, environmental chemistry, all of these areas. But the important thing is that he managed to make a mark in these areas. Sometimes what happens is that if you do many things, you really can't make a mark on any one of them, and he did. The director of toward chemistry, and he, I think, managing the food unit, even while he was in the old SNR in those days. And so I think he found his home in being the director of I.S. But he always continued his teaching and his postgraduate supervision in the link with the school faculty, and especially went on to train a large number of aquarium. His first ever museum housed at the Fiji Museum, and that's another thing, that he always was able to work with others and do things for others, not always wanting to always have things at the university. He had frequent fights with me about adequate funding for the herbarium here, because I think the text of our own throughout here and my own journey here. He was the one who made the center, the I.S. Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Conservation. I.S. went on to become one of 6 regional UN global centers for the analysis of persistent organic pollutants. Work around research was, I think one can say, he was the father of locally managed marine areas. And when I was at the UN Oceans Conference, I found that this concept was now being used internationally, in Madagascar, for instance. But there's all things that grew out of I.S. Really a wonderful, people will think that it is their innovation, but that's fine, because the people took from I.S. this idea and really made it into a very successful idea. Yeah. Like that. Never who it was. He did a lot of other things. I've got a lot of notes, and I would be speaking a long time. I think he did put in a very, very strong, and his reputation also around tech and integration of those. And he had the personality that did not generate too much hostility around his work. No competition. He worked with organizations in a very well. He a lot of money for, and the Hewlett Packard, they gave I.S. $2 million US. Really, by far the largest, as far as I can see, largest grant for this kind of, not development assistance, but really this kind of scientific activity. And that has gone a long way in making more sustainable, because it is a trust, or it's an endowment, but it does allow use of that money. You know, Johan said that he is a scholar. He was a scholar. He wouldn't have been made a professor. This was a personal chair, and those of us who know about the process know that to get a personal chair is more difficult in many ways than getting an advertised chair, because you have 3 or 4 international referees. They have to mostly find consensus. And so Bill was promoted. He has over 230 publications. So that's a lifetime of publications, and all of them quite relevant to what we do. And to date, I am told, he has supervised the highest number of masters and PhD students at USP. And that's another mark of a scholar, because a scholar makes the greatest contribution by training the next generation of scholars. And so in addition to publishing your own articles and books and creating your own reputation, if you can also in that process train people so that other scholars, you promote the community of scholars. So I think we are very grateful for that. He was on the editorial board of numerous journals. He was frequently invited to lead government committees or chair them. And, I think he made a huge contribution in spreading the rigor of scientific research to be used as the basis for policy. And he did that by his personality, by his willingness to share things with everybody else. He also was a recipient of some very major awards. He got the Nikkei Award for the Best Sustainability Project from Japan. He won the Equator Initiative from UNDP. Now this is really a very big, and if I can remember, this was announced at one of the major international events. And this is a global competition, and he won that. So that's a very big award. Within the university, he was given the award for the best researcher of the university. So we've been trying to reward people who shine in various areas. He was the recipient of the Pacific Environment Leadership Award. He was the recipient of the USA National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Excellence Award for promoting diversity in coastal or ocean resource management. And he was also very interested in all the business aspects of I.S. So I'm told that that I.S. is the only section of the university that ever received the Fiji Business Excellence Award. And that really, I think, speaks to his versatility, the scholar, mentor, but also knowing how to run his operation. He was a convener of major things like the Oceania Foods. He was chair of the Pacific Action Committee on Human Ecology. Really, a whole lot of things that he was internationally recognized for. A whole lot of committees that indicated the service that he provided. I don't think, I think very few people have served the university for such long period and have left such major legacy. And so it is very nice that we have this occasion to share our views and our gratitude with Bill's family. Now, I said I will speak a little bit about my own reflections. So, of course, as he went up and I went up in the system, we interacted quite a bit. And I think from possibly from 1990, it was an interaction from me and senior management as Pro-Vice Chancellor and then Deputy Vice Chancellor, and him in some of these roles. And Bill was a very interesting person. He would argue his case quite passionately. And then, of course, the university needs that checks and balance and people who can articulate their interests. But he was also a person who, at the end of the day, looked after the institutional interests. And I think that's what made Bill really that much more valued. We would have huge arguments around whether institutes should get subsidies and what level those subsidies were, but he settled down in the end with whatever the consensus was. We'd have big debates in Senate around many of those things, and of course, quite often, it's one of those things that for a significant portion of my career, I wasn't very much favored by the science people. Because one of my jobs was to make the university more sustainable. And so one of my first sort of interactions with people in this area was when we sort of talked about the economics of teaching and the viability of courses, and when I found out that people were doing 6-hour labs, and I asked the question, who does 6-hour labs around? Because when we looked at Auckland, they did 4-hour labs and all that. And when we recalculated the internal funding model, this is way back in 1994, there was a big reduction in the funding of some of these things. And so there was in a way, a fairly robust engagement at that time. And then I think eventually it sort of settled into a more, well, I think it was always very respectful for each one of us, respecting where people were coming from. But later on, I do remember how, and I want to say why I feel Bill had this sort of character that made him such a strong institutional person. So when I came back as Vice Chancellor, of course, there was a huge financial problem and we had to make some very big changes. And I had to ask for for approval for people to give up a portion of their salary for a short while in order to get the deficit in order. And in that time, lots of things had to be done. But in all cases, I found Bill actually making the case for the institution. Once he understood that is something that needs to be done in order to support the institution, then he would be a champion of that. And I would have very fond memories of him because he excelled, he helped others, he argued his case as all of us should, but he was, at the end, he was an institutional person, always looked to what was good for the university, what was good for the institute, and he was always able to say, well, if it is good for the university and the institute doesn't get as much as it should, I'm still okay, as long as I can go on and do my work. And I would remember that. As he got sick, we had the opportunity to have some discussions. Of course, I regret our life is such that we somehow miss moments where you should spend more time with people. And just today we were having lunch with the former head of state of Samoa, and it was a bit around how each one of us is having to run and not having enough time to focus on what may be more important things in life. And so that's a bit of my regret about not spending more time with Bill in the later part of his life, but I'm glad that we talked, and I'm very glad that we are doing this celebration of his achievements. And on behalf of the university, for the family especially, and for his friends and well-wishers, I do want to put on record our tremendous gratitude for the model and the legacy that he leaves behind. Nakabakalibu.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. I'm learning a few new things from our speakers. I noted the subsidies for institutes here, so I might revive this discussion at some point. So another person who has worked with Bill in various capacities is the Dean of Faculty of Science, Technology and Environment, Associate Professor Angela Jokan, whom I invite to share her reflections. Dean?
Thank you, Johan. Vice Chancellor and President, Professor Rajesh Chandra and Mrs. Chandra, senior officials of the Fiji government, representatives of regional organizations and NGOs, the chair of the I.S. Advisory Committee, Mr. Robin Yarrow, director of I.S., colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really glad that I'm able to share some memories of Bill with you. Bill joined the university when I was in my second year of studies, doing chemistry, and I still remember, and we used to be really small. I think our chemistry class had 15 students or something. So we got to know Bill really well, and to date, I still remember Bill in his shorts, which was always pretty short, and his bula shirt always, and flip-flops. Of course, even in the labs, he'd wear flip-flops because we didn't used to have to worry about. And that was Bill. He taught me organic chemistry mostly, and in fact, I have to hold him responsible for that. Became my favorite area of chemistry. So it was interesting that, like Professor, not the normal that he was very then he said, I can see you as one of the managers at this. Take note of it. I didn't. I just wondered why he said left it. And when I one of these senior managers, I thought back to what might have triggered him to say that. I mean, but about him is that he could see things in people he wouldn't. Often he would somebody, and you'd wonder why you didn't see that. I see a lot of nods, so you know he had this in him. Later, when I became, some several years later, we had quite an awkward time. It was hard for me to be a boss, and it was, I suppose, as well. But after that period, he became a really good mentor. He would pick up the phone if he remembered something, and he will talk to you about it and guide you. And in the early days, that was very, very useful. One of the things that I'll never forget about Bill is when the Vice Chancellor mentioned that we all were asked to, try and give up some of our salaries to recover some deficits. Bill came to me one day and said, I'm going to give up half my salary for a whole year to save some money for the faculty. And that's the kind of person, and he did. He worked full time, but he only got paid half his salary for a whole year. And he didn't ask for it to go back, but we insisted that he got back to his normal salary. And from people like them, I think, people like us learn a lot of things about being an institutional person. And he was a great mentor in that. I do want to add one more thing. Those of us who've attended meetings with Bill will know that Bill had this very peculiar habit, or what shall I say? It wasn't a habit, it was ability. He could do two things at the same time. We'd all go to a meeting well prepared and would be, contributing. He'd come to a meeting well prepared, but he'll always come with a bunch of papers, either marking or correcting. Even in Senate, he'd sit there doing that, but he would contribute better than most of us in that meeting. So he could literally do two things at the same time with the same commitment. And I've never seen anybody like that. And again, I see a lot of nods because you've all experienced that about Bill. We've often talked about that amongst ourselves. So that was Bill. I think the Vice Chancellor's mentioned a lot of things. And these are the few things that I've mentioned about him, and there are many more. But he was a very special person, and we will always remember him. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have two more speakers. As mentioned before, Bill contributed not only in USP, but also Fiji, and indeed the whole region. We will hear from Mr. Robin Yarrow, who is also the chair of the advisory committee of I.S. He has known Bill for many years as well. He will share his contributions to Fiji's development. And then after Mr. Yarrow, we will have Dr. Seriana Kumbuambola, who is a senior quality coordinator at USP, has worked at I.S. as well. So she will share with us her reflections on Bill's contributions to quality at USP. So first up, we'll invite Mr. Robin Yarrow.
Thank
Thank you, Master of Ceremony and Director Johan, the Vice Chancellor and President of University of the South Pacific, Professor Chandra, Mrs. Chandra, also the Dean of the faculty, Dr. Angela, and all staff of both the Institute and of course the wider university, all friends of Bill's and all other friends here this evening. I must say good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak in this way. I hope you can all hear me, yes? I was fortunate to meet late Professor Bill soon after he started here at USP in 1984. And we served together in these early years of his appointment here on several committees together, and we used to meet in various other meetings quite regularly, both government meetings and NGOs. At the time, I worked in the Ministry of Agriculture, so it's perhaps understandable that we would cross paths quite regularly. Bill and I shared a deep interest, more than an interest, it was really a love for nature. For example, we greatly enjoyed fishing on foot up some of our beautiful rivers like the Waindina, the Waimanu, the Wainimala. It's a bit like trout fishing. You'd have a rod and a lure, and you'd cover a lot of distance. It wasn't sitting on the bank, it was walking, fording the rapids, climbing up the banks. And I think of you here tonight, Dr. Watling, he's fished with me and he knows what it's like. And Bill and I used to take great pleasure in that because we were able to get very close to some of Fiji's beautiful terrestrial nature, the forest, freshwater ecosystems. Sometimes we caught fish, sometimes we didn't. But when we did catch fish, we'd put them back. We had a catch and release policy. Then during the course of my several consecutive terms on USP Council for the Fiji government from 1997, I was invited to serve as chair of the advisory board. This brought me quite a bit nearer to Bill in a professional sense, and we also became close friends. In 2003, we were both appointed to the Council or the Managing Board of the National Trust of Fiji, and this is a very important entity. It's the only one in the whole Pacific Island region, and we served together for almost 14 years on the National Trust. I have progressively met many postgraduates of USP whom Bill mentored, and all of them served to reinforce to me, in terms of their knowledge and their capacity, what an outstanding teacher and person he was. I have also had the opportunity to work very closely with quite a number of the postgraduates. Some, of course, are here this evening. And they also reinforced further Bill's outstanding qualities. And these were in organizations like the National Trust of Fiji, Nature Fiji, Marangeti Viti, IUCN, Conservation International, and World Wildlife Fund. So I speak with some experience of the graduates that Bill had impacted on. The late Bill's roles and contributions at various levels to USP and of course indirectly to our region, but very particular to Fiji, are really very significant ones. And it would not be possible for me to do full justice to his achievements here. His role in developing and expanding and enhancing the Institute of Applied Sciences is of course preeminent. This facility is clearly one of USP's standout successes and is one of which we can all be rightly proud. It meets many vital needs and is an absolute asset to our region's natural resources sector. Bill was, as we've heard from Professor Chandra, first and foremost a scientist, and organic chemistry, as many will know, was his forte. He obtained his PhD from the highly regarded Berkeley University in San Francisco, following his first stint in Fiji when he was based in Nandonga. His skills and aptitudes went far beyond the academic and scientific spheres, as Bill had a great capacity to work in a multidisciplinary, multi-ethnic team and to provide leadership in the process. At a very early stage here at USP, Bill demonstrated his strength in going beyond the laboratory, initially by extending into a number of emerging fields, including food quality, food handling, food preservation. Then activities proceeded even further afield into water quality, land use management, and catchment management, as well as into research on climate change, locally managed conservation, and recording traditional knowledge in the environment. So in many ways, this was breaking new ground for USP. This more proactive role for the Institute required major funding, and Bill was able to build a very meaningful long-term partnership with several donors, including the Packard and MacArthur Foundations. This covered priority projects, equipment, and very importantly, postgraduate scholarships. Building reputation and confidence required great effort and commitment, and Bill's diligent and thorough approach, coupled with excellent results, bear testimony to his drive in this direction. In addition, Bill had a special ability to get effective teams operating on large projects and to negotiate funding support for the key activities. In many cases, these activities were a first for the region and demonstrated very clearly what well-trained regional scientists could undertake and achieve. There is no doubt that Bill's passion and clever strategic thinking were key early attributes which made a major impact on donors. As the Institute's laboratory facilities and staff were progressively developed and enhanced, international accreditation gained in several areas underlined its reputation with donors, clients, and other stakeholders for high quality and reliable services. Several outstanding initiatives included supporting and establishing the Fiji Locally Managed Marine Areas, or FLEMA network, which Vice Chancellor has referred to, and the Enabling Trust Fund, which took community-based conservation and management of marine resources to a new level. In many ways, the FLEMA success story, working with and empowering island communities to sustainably manage their natural resources, underlined Bill's vision and philosophy. A very successful related move was the development of the innovative Pacific Islands Community Conservation Course, the PICCC, which was aimed in particular at NGOs and their staff across the region working in resource management. Bill always had a great confidence in the ability of Pacific Islanders. He never failed trying to assist those who required academic guidance, advice on personal development matters, in funding support strategies, in addressing conflicts, in assisting with job searches, and in many other ways, too numerous to list. He did not always have success, but he willingly assisted a large number of people, often beyond his work area, some of whom he'd only met once or twice. In fact, Bill's influence was immense, probably more than he and many others realized. He was always kind, generous and thoughtful, humble and unassuming, deliberate and methodical. And very importantly, he was always willing to give people a chance. And he never asked anyone to do something he would not do himself. He was a great networker, always working to involve people as far as possible. In addition to his own depth of professional expertise, Bill was extremely well-read and knowledgeable across a wide range of subjects and sectors. Many will testify to this, whether it was in religion, sport, or politics. In addition, Bill was a great believer in respecting and adhering to local customs and protocol, in particular with communities in rural areas. This was no doubt shaped by his very close association with Nasingatoka village in Nandrona, where during his Peace Corps posting, he was adopted as a son by the late chief of this village, and in fact assigned a chiefly title for use in ceremonial events there. As most will know, Bill also devoted considerable time to national service beyond USP. This included a long period on the Council of the National Trust of Fiji, as I've mentioned, serving as the chair of SPACI, the South Pacific Action Committee on Human Ecology and Environment, and as editor of the Journal of the Fiji Museum, plus service on a number of other editorial boards, about 5 or 6, and half of these were based overseas. Bill never shirked from taking responsibility in this way, and having served with him on the National Trust of Fiji Council, I can say with authority that he added great value. He often presented different perspectives on issues and was extremely helpful with the financial administration, drawing from his own hands-on I.A.S. experience. Bill's advice on traditional protocol matters was most valuable. Bill rarely missed a meeting of the National Trust Council, a role which he took very seriously. These attendances were naturally on top of his I.A.S. responsibilities. On occasions when his workload was exceptionally heavy, he managed to mark student papers and do other institute work, as Angela's already mentioned, while concurrently paying full attention and actively contributing to the discussions in the council. This was quite uncanny, because Bill would appear to be quite a way away because his head was in his papers, but he would tune in very quickly with extremely pertinent comments and questions. Bill, as we've heard, published a long list of research papers which contain many relevant findings. While the bulk of these relate more to Fiji, many can be applied to other Pacific Island countries and territories. And as we've heard from Professor Chandra, he was awarded several prestigious awards and recognition, and I won't go into those because they've been listed. Bill was a man of many parts who made very important contributions to Fiji as well as to the region. The Institute's laboratory services have assisted Fiji's development by providing vital training and analysis, and have acquired much relevant knowledge on natural resource management, including both aquatic and fisheries resources management, sanitation and hygiene, water supply to vulnerable communities, and in community resilience. The Institute has earned deserved recognition and commendation from FAO, for example, as well as from a whole range of other organizations. In addition, important contributions have been made in developing applied research to generate new learning and best practices. The South Pacific Regional Herbarium, working with the Natural Resources Unit, has continued very high quality work on a range of EIAs, including well beyond Fiji, in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and even in Papua New Guinea. The herbarium has also provided many other valued outputs. Excellent work has been conducted on natural products and drug discovery by the Pacific Natural Products Research Center, and in the broad area of conservation, as well as in supporting graduate students in research. The list, of course, goes on and on. All of these activities have been underpinned by a high-caliber professional team working to the 2017-2021 Institute Strategic Plan, ensuring quality and reliability at all stages. Bill's hand in all of these diverse and important services has been a most formative one. In summary, Bill's contributions to Fiji's development have been at several levels. The very obvious one is through a strong and effective institute, which meets demands for a range of services, including applied research relevant to national needs. Bill has brought in significant external funding as well as valuable partnerships. And this has enabled the upgrading of infrastructure, the upgrading of capacity to meet expanding needs. The high reputation which the Institute has built up during Bill's tenure has been of great benefit both to the university and to Fiji. The next key level of achievement clearly includes all the postgraduate students for whom Bill facilitated scholarships and then mentored and advised. Bill's close engagement with local communities was another very positive contributing factor in strengthening resource management at the national level. In addition to the valuable applied research and developing long-term meaningful networks, Bill also found time and energy to contribute beyond the university, as we've heard. Individuals of Bill's caliber and qualities are few and far between. We all know that. He was also a thoroughly good human being. He frequently put service before self and was a person of the highest integrity. And he was such a fine role model, always leading by example and walking the talk. Bill remained calm in spite of pressure, and he avoided making enemies. At times, of course, his frankness and direct speaking, he would stand on a few toes and upset a few people. But he did really work to make friends. Bill's compassion for rural, indigenous Pacific Islanders in particular reflected in his vision, views, and work very strongly. For me personally, Bill's brilliant mind stood out above all of his other fine qualities. In short, Bill was an exceptional person who made an immense contribution to Fiji's development. Fiji and the region has been blessed to have had him working in our midst for over 3 decades. May the example of dedicated service, multiple contributions and achievements by the late Professor Bill, his legacy and his legacies continue to inspire the current as well as all future generations of Pacific Islanders. Thank you very much.
Good evening. The Vice Chancellor and President, Professor Rajesh Chandra and Mrs. Dharma Chandra, Excellencies, government representatives, representatives of NGOs that shared a lot of interest with Bill, the Dean of FSTE, colleagues, family, and friends. It is indeed an honor to be asked to speak and pay tribute to this memorial gathering for Professor Bill Aalbersberg, who was respected and will be remembered as Bill to a lot of us. Some of us here at the USP have been fortunate to have been exposed to having Bill as a lecturer, a postgraduate student supervisor, a mentor, a work colleague, a friend, and for people like me, a boss. I worked with Bill for about 4 years, from 2002 to 2006. He was the director of the Institute of Applied Sciences, we know now as I.T.S, while I was the manager analytical services, meaning the person responsible for the day-to-day running of the commercial laboratory of the university. The years 2002 and 2003, I think, were the most momentous years of I.T.S, because in 2003, under Bill's leadership, as we've heard, the laboratory received ISO 17025 accreditation, and that we were registered by International Accreditation New Zealand, shortened INZ. The emphasis in the initial period of accreditation focused on water chemistry and food science. For those of us at I.E.S., it was quite an achievement because it meant, or it implied, that we were technically competent and that data generated at the, in the analytical laboratory could be acceptable internationally. Working with a goal to attain and maintain quality requires a number of things. But most importantly, and this is something I've learned as the Senior Quality Assurance Coordinator of the university, one must have a vision that is shared by all. Not easy, but it means a couple of things. The vision has to be well communicated. As we've heard, Bill was quite articulate in everything he did. Whether you were senior manager or a laboratory technician, we all shared the same vision because Bill made us understand that. He was the go-to person when we had problems, when things went wrong. And at IAS, this was common. We were using instruments that we didn't have a lot of ability to fix when they broke down. So we depended a lot on people from overseas. But Bill was always there to share the problems with, and somehow it got worked out. Bill was very knowledgeable and a good networker. Again, I think Mr. Yarrow has already mentioned that, with statutory bodies, the institutes, stakeholders, the hoteliers, transport people, regional entities like SPREP, and again, the list has been mentioned by Mr. Yarrow, particularly those that were involved in with environmental issues. We also learned that a vision must have standards. Quality in an analytical laboratory implied that accuracy and precision was the order of the day, every day. The quality of reports, whether they were analytical reports, technical reports, or EIA reports, reports from the LMMA group, had to be drafted, revised, and refined to a standard. They all had to be signed off by Bill before they were released. Now, a vision must have an implementation plan that all of us understood. Processes had to be written down with policies. Laboratory SOPs had to be tested to identify the error of accuracy for a particular procedure. In some cases, if I remember, we would have to perform a test 10 or 20 times to find out those numbers for the laboratory. Bill has had to sign off on all these SOPs before they were even released for the rest of us to use. And the vision must be monitored and assessed to see how well we're achieving the targets. I tried to find a word that would summarize Bill. The only word I could think of was empathy. I think Bill had a lot of empathy, both cognitive and emotional. He was able to relate to all of us, whether it was merely cleaning up the glassware or Marika trying to work out what the problem is at the herbarium, or Isoa and his group sorting out the next project of the LMMA. To be a leader, I think you really had to be full of empathy. He had the ability to relate to all of us under his supervision and care, whether it was an office meeting, when you're called to the office, the meeting of senior members of IES, the advisory committee that Mr. Yarrow used to chair, or around Ayangona Bowl on a Friday afternoon, or at an afternoon tea party to celebrate an achievement, or even at a dinner, Bill made an attempt to be present as one of the team members. Bill was a listener and an observer. He could relate to what one was thinking and facilitated a suggestion if he judged it that it had merit. He was gifted in that he could speak in English, in Hindustani, in Fijian, and in the Nandrongan dialect. So we were quite cautious when we were talking about, especially if it's about Bill. He allowed at I.S. the freedom to grow and learn, but with the guidance from him. In his own way, without him knowing, he enticed us to reinvent ourselves so that we became a better version of ourselves, if I can repeat that. For those of us that have been fortunate to have interacted with Bill for some time, I can say that he has enriched our lives. I'd like to finish off with a poem. Professor Bill Aalbersberg, in memory. An international watery rainbow emerged in Bill's office. While some of us enjoyed the colorful and tourist effigy, Bill had his own transparent vision. A clear, pure rainbow of water qualities, of concentrations in ppm, in pp millions and parts per billions, of oxygen demand, heavy metals, contaminants, of coliforms that meet WHO standards, of quality control data, sampling with INZ protocols, of internationally recognized water SOPs, of guiding I.S. to this rainbow of new horizons, of empowering the I.S. staff and students to new abilities and vision forward, of a watery rainbow only Bill could once see. Vinakavakalevu Bill for your gift of a better life for us at USP. Vinak.
Thank you very much to all our four speakers, Vice Chancellor, Dean of FSD, Mr. Robin Yara, and Dr. Siriana. To continue with honoring Bill, we have put together a slideshow presentation highlighting some of his achievements and contributions, which we will see in a moment. And then soon after the slideshow presentation, as mentioned before, Bill was instrumental in shaping the career and the life of many I.A.S. staff. We have Dr. Iso Akoro Vulavula and Tuvere Tuamoto, who composed a song about Bill, and a few of the I.A.S. staff will perform this song after the slideshow presentation, so I hope you will enjoy both items.
Sorry, just before we organize ourselves up here, I'd like to take this opportunity also just to share the lyrics of this song. I think a few months back, Institute of Applied Science held its own celebration for Bill's life. And there were some very beautiful words were said about my tauhu. I normally call him tauhu because I'm from Kandau, he's from Nandronga. And it actually touched my heart, and I'm so fortunate that I have one of the renowned composer and I'm also a musician, and we sat together, put our brains together, and we put together the lyrics based on what we heard from the sharing that was done, held back then. So I hope you enjoy this song, and the lyrics probably will be put up on the board. You can participate in singing the chorus if you are familiar with it. Thank you.
the best.